Lou Correa didn't walk into that hearing to make noise. He walked in to reveal something the public was never meant to see. The moment he opened his mouth, the room changed. No hesitation, no warming up, no political dance. Just a blunt, almost uncomfortable truth. 70% of the people you're arresting have no criminal record. And with that one sentence, the story everyone thought they understood about ICE and its priorities suddenly shattered.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Correa, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with my colleague from Texas. It is a tale of two cities. Secretary Noem, Trump administration, you're going after the worst of the worst criminals, and we agree with you. The problem is 70% of the people you've arrested have no criminal record. You're going after non-criminal immigrants, U.S. citizens, and permanent legal residents. Donna Hughes Brown, Irish citizen, green card holder, 48 years in the United States. She also happens to be the mother of a U.S. Marine, sister to a retired Army colonel. She's in ICE detention since July. She tried to come back from Ireland, arrested, has been there since then. Her crime? She wrote 2 bad checks for less than $80 a decade ago. You arrested her, she's in custody. Her husband, Jim Brown, came to us and told us her story. Jim told us, I voted for President Trump because he promised to go after criminals in our community and not people like my wife. If I can, I'd like to play a video for you. Then he also voted for President Trump.
Yes, sir.
Why did you vote for him?
Because I was an idiot. 80% of the evangelical Christian people were lied to, if you really want to know the truth, and that's exactly what happened. They said criminal, and I believe criminals need to be off the street.
I just want to make sure people watching this understand who you are.
My wife and I, when we don't work, we're ministers. We help the needy. That's what we do. And that's who they're arresting.
Now, we've got Mr. Jim Brown before you. He's standing up. Hopefully you can talk to him a little bit. These people, Donna Hughes Brown, are not the individuals that should be deported. Another case, Narciso Barranco was beaten and arrested by masked agents while working as a landscaper. He's an undocumented immigrant, 30 years in this country, not a traffic ticket. Mr. Barranco is also the father of 3 U.S. Marines. 3 Marines. You want to make a movie of people like this. A man who comes to this country, instills patriotism in his kids. They swear an oath to serve and possibly give up their life for this country. We'll play a video on this as well, please.
Masked federal agents were filmed pinning a man to the ground and repeatedly striking him in the head and neck before putting him in an unmarked car. The man in the video has been identified as Narciso Barranco and is the father of 2 active duty Marines and 1 Marine veteran. The Department of Homeland Security said an illegal alien was arrested by Border Patrol agents after he, quote, assaulted federal law enforcement, adding that Barranco, quote, swung a weed whacker directly at an agent's face. Video shared by DHS and reviewed by CNN shows Barranco running with a weed whacker, but does not show him striking officers.
I also have with us today Alex Barranco behind you, a retired Marine. That's his father. And Alex, on behalf of myself, members here, I want to thank you for your service to our country, and we also thank your brothers for serving our great country. Thank you very much. Got another case. George Rete, 25-year-old, native of California, my home state. He's a U.S. citizen, Army veteran who served in Iraq. Well, on his way to work, he came to an immigration checkpoint, pulled over. I don't know where officers deployed tear gas on him, broke his car window, pepper sprayed him, and dragged him out of his car. An American citizen held for 72 hours without any charges, wasn't even given the opportunity to shower, to wash off that paper
Gentleman's
spray.
time's expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guest. for
Mr.
5
Chairman, I
minutes.
have 2 articles I'd like to present for the record.
Unanimous consent.
Under President Trump, an agency intended to keep Americans safe has diverted resources from child abuse, trafficking, and terrorism to immigration enforcement. Second is this letter from my Orange County Sheriff, Don Barnes, essentially talking about all the individuals under Prop 50 referred to ICE 2025 year to date. 50 of them.
Without objection.
ICE never showed up to pick them up.
Without
Mr.
objection.
Chairman?
I will
Mr. Chairman?
entertain UCs at the end of the hearing. I want to entertain all UC motions at the end of the hearing. We have witnesses. I want to make sure everybody has time. So if we do this now, we do have a witness has to leave. You're just going to be taking time from other members. But I will entertain UC motions at
For the next several minutes, Correa dismantled the official narrative piece by piece, not with theories or opinions, but with videos, names, families, and lives. And what he exposed raised one devastating question. If ICE says it's targeting dangerous criminals, why are the people being beaten, detained, and dragged across the system the very last individuals you'd expect? The hearing begins with a jolt, a video that no one could look away from. A man pinned to the ground, struck repeatedly in the head and neck, then shoved into an unmarked car by masked federal agents. No uniforms, no identification, no context, just force. That man was Narciso Burano, a landscaper who had lived in the United States for 30 years without a single criminal charge. A father of 3 U.S. Marines, DHS claimed he swung a weed whacker at an agent's face, but the video shown publicly didn't depict him hitting anyone. It showed him running, yes, but not striking, not attacking, not matching the narrative officials pushed immediately afterward. And that tiny gap, that missing moment in the footage, became the spark that lit the rest of Correa's questioning on fire. Because if the video doesn't show what DHS says it shows, what else doesn't line up? Correa makes it clear that this hearing is not about shielding violent offenders. He even states outright that both sides of the aisle agree, criminals who threaten communities should be removed. That's not the dispute. The dispute is everything else. Everything that happens when the system widens its net far beyond the worst of the worst, and quietly sweeps in people who have lived peacefully in the United States for years, decades, or even their entire lives. People working, people raising families, people who served in the military or whose children are serving now. The first case he brings forward sets the tone. Donna Hughes Brown, Irish citizen, green card holder, 48 years in the United States. Married to an American, mother of a Marine, sister to a retired Army colonel, detained since July over 2 bad checks written more than 10 years ago, checks totaling less than $80. Not murder, not trafficking, not any violent act, 2 checks under $80. And despite her age, her long-established life, and her clean record, she was taken into custody upon returning from a family trip to Ireland. Correa brings her husband Jim Brown into the story, a man who voted for the administration because he believed ICE was going after criminals, not families like his. A man who said plainly, "I was lied to." A man who broke down describing how he and his wife spent their weekends helping the needy, the exact kind of people he said officers were now targeting. Correa didn't just talk about Brown, he played a video of her husband speaking directly to the committee. He wanted them to see the face of someone who had believed the promises, believed the rhetoric, believed the assurances about targeting criminals, someone who now felt betrayed. That video shook the room, not because it was explosive, but because it was painfully ordinary. A husband trying to understand why his wife of nearly 50 years was sitting in detention for a mistake barely worth a traffic fine. Then Correa shifted back to Burano, not to replay the violence, but to remind everyone who he was. Not a threat, not a gang member, A landscaper, 30 years in the country, zero criminal history, a father who inspired 3 sons to join the Marines, 3 sons who wore the uniform while their father was being slammed into the ground by masked agents without visible badges. The contrast was impossible to ignore. A family who gave 3 children to military service, yet still found themselves on the receiving end of the very enforcement tactics meant for dangerous offenders. To drive the point home, Correa brought one of those sons into the hearing, Alex Barano, a retired Marine. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. His presence alone, sitting directly behind the secretary as the video was discussed, was a statement louder than anything said into a microphone. A reminder that patriotism, sacrifice and service are not shields against a system that has lost its sense of priority. But the most shocking case was still to come, because it didn't involve an undocumented person or a green card holder. It involved a U.S. citizen, George Rhee, 25 years old, born in California, Army veteran, served in Iraq. On his way to work he hit an immigration checkpoint, something most Americans rarely think twice about. But for Rhee, that stop turned into a nightmare. Officers smashed his window, pepper sprayed him, dragged him out of his own vehicle, detained him for 72 hours, and never filed a single charge. Not one. He wasn't even permitted to shower. A United States citizen, a veteran, held without charges, no legal justification, no explanation, nothing. And if a U.S. citizen can be treated this way, Correa implies, who can't be? This wasn't a one-off. It wasn't an isolated mistake or rogue agent. It was part of a pattern Correa laid out step by step, case by case, building a picture of an agency veering far from its stated mission. The mission was public safety. The reality was something different, a system that had quietly expanded its reach far beyond its original boundaries. Another congressman later stepped in to add more evidence into the record. Reports showed ICE diverting resources away from combating child exploitation, trafficking, and terrorism, funneling more energy into immigration actions that weren't aligned with actual threat levels. Another letter from a county sheriff reported dozens of individuals flagged for pickup under local statutes, actual offenders, yet ICE never came for them. They weren't picked up, they weren't processed, they slipped through. Meanwhile, families like the Browns, the Baranos, and citizens like Rhee found themselves detained, pepper sprayed, beaten, or locked in custody. And that's where the hearing cuts deeper. This wasn't just about mistakes, it wasn't just about mismanagement. It was about credibility, the space between what officials said publicly and what the evidence showed privately. DHS repeatedly stated that ICE was focused on dangerous criminals, but the numbers said otherwise. 70% with no criminal record, people with decades of legal residency, people who served the country or who raised children who did, people with roots, jobs, families, mortgages, histories, treated as if they were fugitives. When Correa finally paused, it wasn't because he had run out of examples, it was because his time was up, but the impact had already landed. He didn't shout, he didn't turn the hearing into spectacle, he simply laid out the facts, the videos, the testimonies, the contradictions, and he forced everyone watching, inside the room and across the country, to confront a simple but uncomfortable truth. If enforcement is meant to protect the public, how does detaining legal residents over decade-old minor offenses protect anyone? How does beating a landscaper with 3 Marine sons make America safer? How does pepper spraying a U.S. citizen veteran at a checkpoint uphold the Constitution? And if U.S. citizens themselves can be detained without cause, what does that say about the rest of the system? These aren't political questions, these are legal ones, ethical ones, human ones. The hearing made one thing painfully clear: power without oversight becomes something else entirely. And when the public narrative doesn't match the lived reality of those caught in the system, something has gone deeply wrong. Oversight exists for moments like this, when someone finally stands up and says, "Show me the truth, not the talking points." Because accountability doesn't happen automatically. It happens when people pay attention, when they refuse to accept easy answers, when they demand transparency, when they demand better. And that's exactly why hearings like this matter. If you found this breakdown important, make sure to subscribe for more deep dive coverage, stay informed, and join the conversation in the comments. Your voice matters, and together, we can keep pushing for the accountability every American deserves.